Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here, CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. I'm here today with Peter Christian, and we're going to talk about project management. In fact, Peter's going to go through the 5 successful pillars of project management. Now, Peter, I don't do bios because I think they're boring, and I think everybody else thinks they are as well.
Yeah,
Which is
me too.
we can all be experts by actually showing our expertise rather than this.
Yes.
Anyway, so I always ask people before we get into the conversation is where can people find you, Peter?
Okay, 3 places. Number 1, LinkedIn. If you look up Peter Christian and look for author and instructor and so forth, you can find me, pick me out from the other million Peter Christians out there. I have a website. It's Pete, P-E-T-E, christianbooks.com. So that's the second one. And the third one is if you want to email me, my email address is my initials, Christian53@gmail.com. So any one of those 3, you can get in touch with me.
So you've I mean, you're a really accomplished person, aren't you?
I hope so. I like to think so.
And the reason why you've got a website, Peter Christian Book, is because you've written a couple.
Yes, that's correct.
How many have you written now?
I've written 2. I've got a third one that I could turn into a book if I decide to. Haven't quite yet, but I have 2 that are actually written and published.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so in terms of your background,
hmm
what is it that got you into project management, and then how did you build that skill set out?
I think it just kind of came. My educational background was in industrial engineering, which is a project type of curriculum by nature.
Mm.
So when I got into working, particularly with Crayola Corporation, I just wound up doing a lot of project work. In fact, I ran the project engineering group for about 3 or 4 years, which was primarily to do projects in the operational arena. So it just kind of came naturally, and it kind of headed me towards consulting ultimately, which is basically doing projects for other people. So it's just kind of a natural flow, I guess.
Excellent. So should we go through the 5 pillars then?
Absolutely. And we should clarify they're my 5 pillars because
They're
I'm sure
your
if
5
you
pillars, aren't they,
my
Peter?
5 pillars because I'm sure if people look it up, they will find other people who have 5 different pillars, and that's okay. These are the 5 that I think really solidify project management.
So the 5 pillars of project management in 17 minutes. Go.
Go. Okay, number 1 is certainly to have a plan. You need to know what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, what you want the end result to look like, and then put a plan together that gets you from wherever you're at to wherever you want to go. Particularly, what you do is, and there's one tool called the project charter, which I think is the most important tool in the project management toolkit, where you lay out basically what it is you want to accomplish, how you're going to get there, who's going to help you to get there, what the team looks like, what the milestones are going to be, the budget, and so forth. It's a comprehensive but a fairly limited document. It's only maybe 3 pages long, possibly 5 if you have a really large project. But it covers everything, and that becomes the Bible for the project. So, and that shows you that you have a plan, you have a way to get from here to there, and you utilize that. So when I teach project management and I introduce that to people, and a lot of people do not realize that or haven't used it or whatever, they say that's probably the most important tool that they have in their toolkit. So that would be number 1.
It's for me, the project charter is always been like a summary document.
Yes.
It's that one that you put in the you put it in the drawer and then you get it out and go and it's amazing how, because as with all projects can change and creep.
Yes.
But at the beginning, what you're doing is that you're putting down. I've put roles and responsibilities and stuff. In terms of these people are doing certain things.
hmm
I don't know if you agree with that. Should go in a project charter.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Roles, responsibilities, potential risks that can occur,
Risks. Yeah.
and possible solutions. Again, you don't want to. turn it into a novel or a treatise or anything. So it's a summarization, but it's pretty comprehensive and it covers a lot of aspects. And it's something you continually refer back to on an ongoing basis to make sure that you're not deviating from what you said. Because if you are, that can get you really off course and cause a lot of problems in regards to accomplishing what it is you want to accomplish. So, absolutely, yes, I agree with you.
I think that, yes, I mean, project creep in terms of the requirement and the budget, it's always a risk.
Yes,
And I mean, it happens in pretty much all projects.
yes,
But I agree with you also about having a risk register and saying up front what the risks are.
that's correct. Yep, yep. So that's number one.
Number one.
Number two is to manage the project. It might seem pretty silly, so I was talking about, but you have to manage the project. That's what the project manager does. They, by and large, should not be working on aspects of the project. They should be working with the people who are working on those aspects to manage them, like an orchestra conductor. That he does not play an instrument or she does not play an instrument. They can, but they don't. They get everybody else to work in harmony together so that it all sounds right and flows right. And that's what the project manager does. And that person needs to use the tools that are available to them. And again, there are a number of them. I kind of limit it to about 6 to 8. And you may use all of them and you may use some of them, depending on the project. And they would include the charter, but also a budget, a schedule, a risk register, as you mentioned, where you list the risks and you deal with them. You don't just list them and then forget about them. You keep looking at them to make sure they're not happening. If they are, what you're supposed to do about it. There's a change document in there. You had mentioned about scope creep. Yes, that's an inevitable part of projects, and the manager has to kind of work hard to make sure that that does not happen. If it does, then there's negotiation. You don't just accept more work without changing the schedule, the budget, whatever the roles and responsibilities of people. And then at the end, there's something I call a lessons learned document, which I think is important. Granted, the project is over at that point, but what you do is, as a team, you review how things went and you say, what went really, really well? And you list those things because in the next project, you want to kind of make sure that those things happen again the way they did. Similarly, you want to look at the things that didn't go so well that might have caused problems. And you say, well, why did that happen? And how can we avoid that in the future? And again, that's a learning tool, not just for you and your team, but assuming that there are other teams in your organization, you share that with them so that everybody learns from it. And again, why should you make a mistake and then allow somebody else to make the same mistake when you can kind of warn them about it and they learn from your experiences? So you've got to manage it properly. You utilize the tools and you utilize the people properly, and things should go swimmingly well for you by and large.
I also think, Peter, I totally agree with you, and I think one of the key things about project management is the fact that the person needs to be the project manager.
Yes,
because so often within a project, you have different skill sets, and people are comfortable with doing different things. And quite often, you get the project manager going off and doing something that they feel comfortable with, rather than managing the project.
yes. And that's a danger because then people will look to you to do everything. Okay. And if you don't do it, they're not going to do it on their own. So you've got to hold them responsible and accountable for what they're supposed to be doing. And again, that's identified up front, right when you do the charter. And then you hold them to those things. And if you start to do it for them, there's a lot of people that'll let you do that. And then it all falls on you. And depending on the complexity of the project, that could be a yeoman's task, and you don't want to have that happen. You are the manager, and I got to keep stressing that. I'm managing the people to make sure that they get done the things that are necessary to make the project successful.
Okay, number three.
Number three, and that goes to the team then, okay? Number one is to make sure that they understand what's necessary, what the end result is going to be, that they're in agreement with it, that it's doable, and then to start to define each person's roles and responsibilities. And that's a key thing. Responsibilities. It's one thing to set a role, but if you don't hold people accountable, then to get done what they've signed up for, then again, you're not being a very good manager. And you've got a flexible team because, again, as you mentioned, things change in projects, things go wrong, things get added. I have never had the perfect project in my entire career where there wasn't one problem that cropped up. There were going to be. I think there was an old saying about plans that they're as good until you try to enact them and then things change. Well, that's very true in projects. And you have to be adaptable. You have to be flexible. People can't say, well, that's not what I signed up for. Well, guess what? Yes, you did. Okay. Because at the bottom line is, and all other things as the manager sees fit. So you've signed up for it. Deal with it. Okay. That's just life. And I've run across people that are like shocked when there's a problem that crops up. And I go, that's normal. Get over it. We just deal with it and we move on. But there's some people that think that everything is just going to go swimmingly well, just the way you wrote it. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you want to have a flexible team that all have the appropriate skills. Hopefully, you've worked with those people before. And you trust them and you understand what they're doing and they understand what you want, and it all works again in harmony, like the symphony orchestra, where each section does its part and it all comes out nice and smoothly.
And when or how often should you review those things?
There's no set rule. I hate to cop out and say as when needed, but quite honestly, that's the case. If you overdo it, okay, if you do stuff too much, if you meet too often, if you over communicate, you will turn people off to where they'll spend more time dealing with you than they are with the project. So you establish some basic points, milestones where things need to be done and making sure that they happen. So you certainly want to have it then. But, if a problem crops up, you don't want it to foster and go too long before you address it. And if things are going swimmingly well, you just leave it alone for a little bit of time. So you get used to it as a good project manager. And as you deal more and more with projects, you get a sense for when it makes sense to have a meeting and to review with folks, either as a group or on a one-on-one basis, whatever the case may be, and you get a good feel for it, and then you work at it from there.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Number 4 then, and we kind of touched on it a bit, is communication.
Yeah.
And that starts right at the beginning with once you've defined what the project is and what the outcome is supposed to be, and getting that across to the team and getting agreement. And I talk about communication a lot. I think that's a very important aspect of projects and project management, good communication. And good communication is not, and unfortunately, we fall into this trap because it's so easy to communicate. We can send out a text, we can send an email, we can send whatever, but we don't follow up. Communication is not just doing that. It starts with communicating or sending whatever it is that you need to send, whatever message to the person or persons that need to have that information or whatever the case may be. Then after that, you follow up to make sure that they actually got it and read it and understand it. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And that's a danger because things get lost. I can't tell you how many emails people said, I never saw it. So I regularly follow up, and I do this with my class when I send stuff out. I follow up with them and say, now, did you get whatever? And does it work? And does it make sense? And they say, yes, it does. And thank you very much. And sometimes I have to chase them down to find out because they don't get back to me. But that's the part that you have to do as a project manager. So you send it out, they receive it, you understand that they receive it. Next thing is, do they understand what they received? Okay,
Yeah.
just because they got it doesn't necessarily mean, because we all interpret things differently, even though we
Yes.
should be kind of on the same wavelength. We come at things from different points of view. I mean, look at it. You've got an engineer maybe on the project, you got a marketing person. Well, engineers and marketing people don't communicate real well together. So you got to make sure that they both understand what you're talking about and they get the concept. And finance and HR and on and on and on. They all come at it from their own viewpoints, and you've got to make sure that they understand what your viewpoint is and what you're trying to get across. So once you've got that, then the last part is there an agreement? Because just because you sent it and just because they got it and just because they understand it doesn't necessarily mean they agree with what you said. There may be differences of opinion. In fact, I'd be surprised if there aren't. And you need to talk about those things and come to some resolution because one, you may have made a mistake. You might have oversimplified something or overcomplicated it, or it just doesn't make sense, or whatever the case may be. Or there may be a better way to do something from what you laid out, and you want to hear that because if there is, you certainly want to utilize that. So you come to whatever the compromise or compromises are, and then the communication is complete. And then one last aspect, then you do something about it. Okay, so it's great that you got all this information and stuff, but if you don't do anything with it, it's really kind of useless. The reason for sending information is to let people know what's going on, and so actions can be taken. And if no actions are taken, then there's a failure in the communications link. So those are the things, and I stress that to people. I've written about it, and I promote it, and hopefully your listeners will agree that communication is important, done correctly.
Okay.
Okay?
And number 5.
Number 5, making sure you have management support in what you're doing.
Lovely.
Okay, do not start, particularly on something that really will impact a lot of people, if you don't have management support, because at the worst possible time, you can get your project pulled, or you can have it changed, or you can find out that people are saying, well, I never agreed with that, and
Yep.
why are we doing this? That is not where you want to be. Now, if it's a personal thing that you're doing, let's say it's within your department, it's no big deal, and it's not going to impact a lot of other people, no problem. But usually projects impact a number of different folks. We tend to call them stakeholders,
Yep.
okay? And you need to make sure that before you get started, that you've got the management okay, that yeah, you're headed in the right direction. Yes, they agree with what you're doing and how you're doing it, your budget, your schedule, who's working on it, what the end results are supposed to be, and so forth. Because if you do not have that, management can make you look very, very bad. You can make yourself look very, very bad for not making sure that that happens. So make sure you've got management support at the start. And as things change, make sure that you're keeping them aware of what's going on and what the changes are and what the impacts are going to be. They're typically the ones that are going to come and try to scope creep on you. They're the ones that are going to sneak in and say, Pete, if you could just do this one other little thing in the project, that would be really, really cool. And of course, that one little thing becomes a big thing and can have major ramifications to it. So you need to make sure that management is aware of what's going on. They continue to support you, and whatever the changes are. And if they have something that needs to be changed, that you discuss that and you incorporate it and do whatever is necessary within the project to accommodate whatever the changes are that they're looking for. So those are the 5 pillars that I work with. Of course, there are lots of other things in there, sub pillars and all that good stuff. But if you've got those 5 covered, you're going to have a pretty successful time as a project manager.
I think it's great advice to manage and learn to manage upwards in life.
Yes.
And make sure that the stakeholders are aware of what's going on and are bought into it.
Yeah.
Because as you say, we live in unpredictable times, and all of a sudden people say we're going to cut some budget. Well, where do we cut the budget from? And you need to make sure it's not your project.
Yep.
And part of that is managing people's expectations and managing them and getting them to understand that what you're doing is priority.
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting thing from what you brought up with, let's say, budget cutting. I had one where I worked for a VP, and we were talking about cutting dollars and stuff. And at the time, Lee Iacocca was a very popular person and had written some books and one on project management. And the VP said to me, well, Iacocca says he can cut 10% of anything at any time. So I grabbed the book and I went through it, and I finally found the page where he talked about it. And he says, yes, I can do that. However, the ramifications from that was the part that the VP left out. So I went back, had it underlined, put it in front of him and said, you left out an important part here. Yes, you can cut 10% at any time, but what is the outcome going to be of that 10%? So you really have to make sure what it is you're cutting and what the impact is going to be before you go doing it, rather than just willy-nilly saying, 10%, get rid of 10 people from your department. You got 100, you got to get rid of 10 of them because that's 10%. What does that do to the department? That type of thing. So you've got to be very, very careful when you make statements and do things as to what the impacts are going to be. And that's why it's important when people come with changes, what is going to be the impact then on the project? And people need to understand that before you agree to whatever the changes are that they want.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Peter. I really appreciate you coming in and talking about the 5 pillars of project management. Excellent advice.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely excellent advice. I've made loads of notes. And thank you so much for coming on. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
Okay, so 3 places: LinkedIn, Peter Christian, author, speaker, adjunct professor, project management, PeteChristianBooks.com, which is my website, and then you can email me at phchristian53@gmail.com. Any one of those 3, let me know what it is you'd like to talk about, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, Peter, and talking about project management. Great advice. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Bye, all.